Hi, so today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about why it's important to use a sleeping bag and what are some of the key safety elements to consider using a sleeping bag for your little one. So the key, as I just mentioned, the key thing to consider is safety. So Red Nose and SIDS do recommend that you do put your baby in a sleeping bag when you stop swaddling your baby. And the reason for that is that no blankets are then potentially able to come over the baby's face and smother them, and it's going to keep them really nice and comfortable throughout the evening, and it's a much safer option than using blankets as they start to move around the cot a little more. As I mentioned just then, warm and comfortable, that's the next point. Really important to try to keep the baby comfortable throughout the evening, so then they're not going to be waking as much throughout the evening, and then you'll hopefully have a more sustained sleep, as will the baby. So using sleeping bags that are made of natural fibres, which ours are 100% organic cotton. They've got organic cotton wadding as well, so the inner and outer and the wadding are all 100% organic cotton. So great to help the baby regulate its temperature better, and a fantastic choice for your baby. Another thing to consider, another really important point, is sleep association. So having something that explains to the baby or tells the baby in some way that it's sleep time now is a fabulous thing to consider, using and incorporating into your sleep routine for your baby. So either sleep association, sleep cue, whatever you'd like to call it, using a sleeping bag is great for that purpose. Another thing that also is fantastic with our sleeping bags is that they do have a dual zip, and they are fantastic for transferring your baby from the pram into their cot or sleep space without having to completely wake the baby. Taking off the sleeping bag and having to put it back on, you won't have to do that with our sleeping bags. So as I mentioned, they've got a dual zip, so you zip from the bottom to be able to have a quick nappy change is also a great feature here. But then, as I mentioned, what you can do, we do have this little bit at the back here. So there's a little pocket or a little hole, and that's to feed the restraint, or the bit that comes through the middle of the legs of the baby, and clip that restraint or seat belt in, and keep this zip just open enough so you can do up the seat belt. Then when you get to your destination or back home after you've had a bit of a walk or been out in the pram, you can then unclip that and then zip back down, and imagine your baby's asleep. So then you could pick your baby up nice and carefully and place them into their sleep space. So that's a great one to consider and to keep in mind with these sleeping bags, because that feature has been added for ease for the parents to be able to transfer them into their sleep space without having to fully undress the baby. Also, as I mentioned, accessing the nappy, middle of the night, that sort of thing, and then getting them back to sleep really quickly is obviously a really important thing to consider, and you want to have a more sustained sleep for you and your baby. You'll wake more rested, the baby will be easier to deal with during the day, and you'll be better to deal with as well. So how to fit a sleeping bag safely is really important as well. So what you're looking for is a relatively fitted neck, so it's not too baggy around the neck hole, as well as relatively fitted through the body. The size of this baby is roughly a 4 kilo size, so it's going to be a little bit big for the body, but the head size is what we're looking at this point in time. So this head size is roughly a 3 to 6 month head size. So this sleeping bag is the smallest one that we do. It should fit babies from 3 months all the way up to 1 year. So what you're looking for is, we'll sit the baby up. What you're looking for is you want to make sure that their head won't actually slip through. We'll lift it up a little bit. You wouldn't do this with your own baby, but lifting it up a bit so that we just make sure that head doesn't slip through the neck hole, that it's not going to come up over the baby's mouth and nose to smother them, and they can't fall into the sleeping bag. We're also going to make sure, like we said, it's fairly fitted across the body and through the arms, so that we just make sure that baby is comfortable and safe in that sleeping bag. So that's a bit of a tip on how to fit them. When you're choosing to buy a sleeping bag, it's also important to consider the TOG rating. Now, TOG stands for Thermal Overall Grade. It's just a measurement of warmth. It's actually how they work out what is going to be best for your baby in the room temperature that you're in. So this one here is a 2 TOG, and we've got our TOG ratings written up here. On every garment that you purchase, it will have a guide of the TOG ratings and explain to you what that means. So we've got a 2 TOG sleeping bag here. So we're looking to sleep our baby in a nursery or room temperature of 18 to 22 degrees. So that's part of how you choose a sleeping bag. You also want to consider how your baby runs, so your baby's temperature. If your baby typically is a bit warmer than average, then you might put less clothing on underneath. So the clothing that you're going to be dressing your baby in underneath is also really important, and choosing natural fibres is always the best idea. It's going to help your baby regulate the temperature better. Natural fibres also absorb sweat keeping your baby more comfortable as well. So that's a really important thing to consider. So really the three main things you want to be considering with the TOG is you're looking for ambient room temperature. So what is the room temperature? What am I thinking I'm going to need to put on my baby for that evening? Then looking at the TOG rating, and there is a guide on our website. There's information here on each one of the products as well. So when you choose to buy one, it will have the TOG rating there. And then what you want to be thinking about is your baby's temperature, as we mentioned. That's the second thing. And third thing is layers. How many layers are you putting on your baby? So they're the three things you want to consider when you're thinking about TOG ratings, and they're the things that are considered when they're creating a TOG rating for a product. So we've got a range of different TOG ratings that we create, or that we have here at Pure Baby. So we've got a 0.5 TOG, which is for the high summer. So the room temperature, or the temperature of the space the baby's sleeping, would need to be 24 to 27 degrees. The next one is 1 TOG, and that needs to be 22 to 26 degrees. 1.5 TOG is 20 to 24 degrees. A 2 TOG, like we just said, is 18 to 22 degrees. 2.5 TOG is 16 to 20 degrees, and the 3 TOG, which is our warmest sleeping bag for high winter, is 14 to 16 degrees. So that's quite a chilly night. So for each, I guess, season, you've got a different sleeping bag or TOG rating to consider purchasing. You also want to really think about the size that you're purchasing, and we've mentioned that this one here is the smallest one that we do, 3 months up to 12 months. We do also have a medium size, which is this one here, and this medium size is for babies from 1 to 2 years of age. Then you've got the largest one, which is a 2 to 3 size. So 2-year-old to 3-year-old, and as you can see, that's quite large, but it's great, it gives plenty of growth room for your baby. And buying the right size is really important. Then you need to consider, how many do I buy? Because one won't really be enough if one gets wet or gets soiled in some way. You want to have some backups. So rule of 3 applies here, and I've talked about this before, but I think rule of 3 is the good thing to have in your mind when it comes to those bigger items like sheets, towels, sleeping bags, and that sort of thing. So you want to be having 1 on the baby, 1 in the wash, and then 1 in the cupboard, or 1 drying. So that's roughly 3. So that's a really good place to start, and it's going to help you not have to worry to dry one really quickly and get it onto the baby. And these do have organic wadding, so you want to make sure we're not putting those in the dryer. We're drying them flat, so they will take a little bit to dry, particularly in the winter months. So having enough on hand is really important as well. So how to feel your baby's temperature, because we talked about the temperature of the baby. Obviously a thermometer is great, but if you don't have a thermometer, you can feel the baby's tummy. So putting your hand down onto the baby's tummy, chest, back of the neck, or back. And if the baby's core temperature in this part of the body is fairly comfortable, then you know they're okay, they're not too warm and not too cold. So those sort of things are really important to consider. One other thing I will also mention is when you place your baby into the sleep space, what you need to think about. So we're going to place the baby in here now, just as a quick demonstration. Now it doesn't matter about the length here, because that is safe on the baby, the length of the sleeping bag in the sleep space. But you want to consider having nothing else in the sleep space. So no bumpers, pillows, blankets, toys. Everything needs to be nice and clean and clear. And as we mentioned, the sleeping bag is the replacement of any other bedding. So just the sleeping bag goes on whatever you're wearing underneath. Nothing else needs to be in the sleep space. So that's a really important feature to consider when you're setting up your nursery or sleep space for your baby. You can jump onto the SIDS website or Red Nose website and download and read their brochure on safe sleeping, and that's going to give you lots of information about how to set up your cot or sleep space for your baby. So I definitely recommend that you do that, just to make sure that you're adhering to some of those safety things to keep your baby safe. You also want to consider, when you're putting your baby in a sleeping bag, that it isn't now recommended to put your baby in a sleeping bag and then into your car seat. It is important you remove the sleeping bag or the big jacket or bulky items before putting your baby into a car seat. And the reason for that is that we want the baby to be quite firmly restrained in the car seat to prevent movement if there is an accident in the car. So it is really important to remove anything bulky. Again, anything bulky must be removed, like a sleeping bag or jackets or padding on the baby, and then you could place something over the top of the restraints if you want to keep the baby warm. If you've got a long journey, you could tuck a blanket in or something nice and warm across the top once you've restrained the baby in the car seat. But remember, it is important to remove sleeping bags, jackets and bulky items when you're putting your baby into a car seat to keep them safe. So one thing before we finish up is I want to quickly mention about our comfort zone. This is not a sleeping bag. This is designed instead of using a dressing gown. So when your baby gets up in the morning or before they go to bed at night and they don't have their sleeping bag on yet and they're still toddling around, or you're going to be feeding them in their high chair, etc., but you want to keep them nice and snug and warm, this is great. It does have organic wadding as well. It's got little pads on the bottom that are grippy, so to help your baby not slip in their home space. And you would just have the baby in their singlet and pajamas underneath this, and it's going to keep them nice and warm and cozy before they go to bed at night or in the morning when they get up, and they just you still got them in their pajamas. So this is a great one to consider for those colder months as well, as something to consider to keep your baby comfortable. So it's all about getting sleep. We want sleep, the baby wants sleep. If the baby sleeps well, they have a sustained sleep, you're going to sleep well too. So all of these points that I've just spoken about are really important to consider, and I hope this has been useful for you today. Thank you so much for your time.